What if I told you that some of the most beautiful plants you could possibly buy at your local nursery are ticking time bombs waiting to destroy your property? Plants that seem harmless in their little pots that look gorgeous in garden magazines that your neighbor planted 5 years ago and now regrets every single day. Most people don't know this, but while we're all carefully planning our dream gardens, researching native plants, and worrying about deer and rabbits, there are plants out there that will turn your backyard into a battleground. Plants that laugh at your attempts to control them. And today, I'm going to show you 20 of them that will change the way you think about gardening forever. Stick around because number 13 on this list produces chemicals that literally poison the soil around it to kill competing plants. And number 20 is so aggressive that it can take over an entire acre of land in just a few years, sending up shoots everywhere you don't want them. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because we post new videos every week that'll save you time, money, and countless hours of frustration in your garden. So, let's get into it. Here are 20 destructive plants that will ruin your garden, ranked from annoying to absolutely nightmarish. Number 1, bamboo, the underground invader. Let's start with bamboo, specifically the running types. And this seemingly elegant plant has one of the most destructive root systems in the gardening world. Running bamboo doesn't just grow where you plant it. It sends underground rhizomes shooting out in every direction at speeds that seem impossible for a plant. Phyllostachys species, the running bamboos, can send rhizomes traveling 10 to 15 feet in a single growing season. And these aren't delicate little roots. They're thick, woody, sharp-tipped spears that punch through landscape fabric, crack concrete patios, and have been documented breaking through building foundations. Here's what makes bamboo so devastating. Those underground rhizomes can dive 3 feet deep and travel under fences, driveways, and property lines. Homeowners have woken up to find bamboo shoots erupting through their garage floors, popping up in their neighbor's yard 50 feet away, and cracking the foundations of garden walls. Modern landscaping horror stories are filled with bamboo nightmares. One rhizome barrier installed incorrectly, one small gap in containment, and within 3 years, you've got bamboo everywhere. And here's the nightmare part. Even when you think you've removed it all, microscopic fragments of rhizome left in the soil can regenerate entire plants. The reason bamboo became so popular is simple. It's beautiful. It grows fast, and it provides instant privacy screening. But the running types should never ever be planted without industrial-strength rhizome barriers buried at least 30 in deep with overlapping seams. Even then, it requires constant vigilance. For anyone who planted running bamboo without barriers, you're in for years of battle. Think of it as the plant that seemed like a great idea until it literally invaded your life, your neighbor's life, and everyone's property within a 100 feet radius. Number 2, mint, the escaped prisoner. Mint might be the most deceptively dangerous plant on this list. This cheerful herb with fragrant leaves that everyone loves in their tea has an underground agenda that would make bamboo jealous. Mentha species spread by runners both above and below ground, and they do it with ruthless efficiency. Plant mint directly in your garden bed, and within 1 season, it'll have sent runners 2F in every direction. By year 2, it's colonized half the bed. By year 3, it's choking out everything else and popping up in places you didn't even know were connected. Here's why mint is so destructive. The runners travel underground, sending up new plants every few inches. Even tiny fragments of root left in the soil will regenerate complete plants. Pull it up, and you're guaranteed to leave behind root pieces that'll come back stronger. Experienced gardeners know the iron rule. Never plant mint in the ground. Always use containers, and even then, those containers need to be checked regularly, because mint will try to escape through drainage holes. Some varieties are so aggressive they'll root from nodes touching the soil surface around the pot. The plant spreads everywhere because it's actually useful. People want fresh mint for cooking and drinks, but that momentary convenience turns into decades of regret when your entire herb garden becomes nothing but mint. Your flower beds are invaded by mint, and you're pulling mint runners out of your lawn. For small gardens and raised beds, mint is an absolute disaster. It doesn't just compete with other plants. It actively dominates and excludes them. Think of it as the friendly herb that moved in as a house guest and slowly took over your entire property, room by room, bed by bed, until nothing else could live there. Number 3, Japanese knotweed, the foundation destroyer. Japanese knotweed isn't just invasive. It's genuinely destructive to human infrastructure in ways that seem almost intentional. Fallopia japonica is the plant that mortgage lenders actually consider when assessing property value in affected areas, because its presence can literally devalue your home. This plant grows from rhizomes that can penetrate 7 feet deep and spread 60 feet horizontally from a single plant. Those rhizomes are capable of growing through tiny cracks in concrete, asphalt, and building foundations, then expanding as they grow, cracking and breaking the structure apart. Modern case studies document Japanese knotweed destroying driveways, cracking foundation walls, breaking through basement floors, and compromising drainage systems. In the UK, it's considered such a serious problem that you're legally required to disclose its presence when selling property, and many buyers simply walk away. Here's what makes it catastrophic. The plant grows up to 4 per day during peak season. Cut it down, and it regrows from the rhizomes. Dig it up, and any fragment of rhizome left behind. Even a piece the size of your fingernail can regenerate a complete plant. Professional eradication can take 3 to 5 years of repeated herbicide treatment and costs thousands of dollars. The bamboo-like stems grow 10 feet tall in a season, creating dense thicket that exclude all other vegetation. When stems die back in winter, you're left with a wasteland of dead stalks and bare ground vulnerable to erosion. Japanese knotweed spread worldwide as an ornamental plant because it grows fast and looks lush. But that fast growth comes at a price measured in destroyed property values and infrastructure damage. For anyone who discovers it on their property, you're facing years of expensive professional remediation. Think of it as the plant that doesn't just ruin your garden, it attacks your house, your driveway, and your property value with equal enthusiasm. Number 4, English ivy, the silent strangler. English ivy looks so elegant, climbing up brick walls and covering ground under trees, and that's exactly how it tricks people into planting it. Hedera helix is one of those plants that seems perfectly civilized until suddenly it's not, and by then it's too late. The plant climbs using aerial rootlets that work their way into tiny cracks and crevices in wood siding, mortar, and tree bark. As these rootlets expand, they gradually pry apart whatever they're attached to. Wood siding gets damaged, mortar joints crumble, and trees suffocate under the weight. Studies show that ivy covering trees blocks sunlight to leaves, adds enormous weight to branches, making them prone to storm damage, and provides highway access for pests and diseases to reach the canopy. Mature ivy covering a tree can add hundreds of pounds of weight that the tree never evolved to support. Here's the traditional disaster scenario. Someone plants English ivy as ground cover under trees or along a fence line. For a few years, it looks great, staying low and spreading nicely. Then one day, you notice it's climbing. Within a few years, it's covered the fence, the trees, the side of your house, and is sending runners across your lawn and into your flower beds. The real problem is that mature ivy produces berries that birds eat and spread everywhere. Those seeds germinate in your gutters, your roof tiles, and everywhere birds perch. Soon you've got ivy seedlings popping up all over your property and your neighbors' properties. Ivy got popular simply because it's evergreen and grows in shade where nothing else will. But that shade tolerance means it'll grow up and blocking light and slowly destroying structures. Removal requires years of cutting, pulling, and vigilance. For historic buildings and mature trees, English ivy is genuinely dangerous. It's not just unsightly, it's actively destructive. Think of it as the plant that hugs your home and trees to death while looking elegant doing it. Number 5, Kudzu, the vine that ate the South. Kudzu is legendary for a reason. Pueraria, Montana can genuinely grow a foot per day during peak growing season. That's not gardening folklore. That's documented reality. This Japanese import was deliberately planted across the American South for erosion control, and it's been burying the landscape ever since. A single kudzu plant can grow 60 ft in a single season, covering and smothering everything in its path: trees, shrubs, buildings, abandoned cars, utility poles. Kudzu doesn't discriminate. It climbs, it covers, and it kills everything underneath by blocking all sunlight. Here's what makes kudzu apocalyptic. The vines root at nodes, so a single plant becomes dozens of connected plants across hundreds of feet. The roots can weigh hundreds of pounds and penetrate 10 feet deep. Cutting the vines just encourages more vigorous regrowth. Chemical control requires repeated applications over multiple years. Modern estimates suggest kudzu covers over 7 million acres in the southeastern United States. Entire forests have been converted to kudzu monocultures where nothing else can grow. Driving through affected areas, you see landscapes that look like green waves have frozen in place, covering everything. The vine spreads partly because it was planted deliberately, but mostly because it's nearly impossible to eradicate once established. A single missed root crown will regenerate the entire infestation. Seeds can remain viable in soil for years. Kudzu doesn't belong on a list of garden plants. It belongs on a list of ecological disasters, but people still occasionally plant it deliberately for fast privacy screening or erosion control, which is like solving your mouse problem by introducing tigers. For anyone considering kudzu for any reason whatsoever, don't. Just don't. Think of it as the plant that turns your garden, your property, and your entire neighborhood into a green burial mound. Number 6, trumpet vine, the beautiful destroyer. Trumpet vine produces some of the most spectacular orange and red flowers you'll ever see. Hummingbirds love it. Gardeners love it. And then they discover what it's actually doing underground and above ground. And the love affair ends fast. Campsis radicans spreads by underground runners that can travel 30 ft from the parent plant, popping up in the middle of lawns, through mulch beds, and right next to foundation. The vines climb using aerial rootlets similar to English ivy, and they're strong enough to tear siding off houses, rip down gutters, and damage wood structures. Here's the traditional trajectory. Someone plants trumpet vine on a trellis or fence for its gorgeous flowers. First year, great. Second year, beautiful blooms. Third year, suckers start appearing 15 ft away. Fourth year, it's climbing the house. It's in the lawn, and it's impossible to keep under control. The vines become thick and woody with age, strong enough to crush lightweight structures and pry boards apart. The aerial rootlets work into every crack and gap, gradually destroying whatever they're attached to. Professional landscapers warn specifically about planting trumpet vine near houses or other structures, because once it gets a grip, removal is extremely difficult. The vines have to be cut, the aerial rootlets have to be scraped off without damaging the surface underneath, and the underground runners have to be dug up. The plants spread across gardens because those trumpet-shaped flowers really are beautiful and hummingbirds really do love them. But you can enjoy hummingbirds without giving them a plant that'll tear your house apart. Native alternatives exist that don't spread aggressively. For anyone who already has established trumpet vine, you're facing years of constant removal of suckers and runners. Think of it as the plant that promises you hummingbird paradise and delivers a nightmare of vines trying to dismantle your house board by board. Number 7, wisteria, the pergola crusher. Chinese and Japanese wisteria look absolutely magical when they bloom. Those cascading purple flower clusters seem like something from a fairy tale. And then the woody vines start doing what woody vines do. And your pergola, your arbor, or your tree starts dying. Wisteria sinensis and Wisteria floribunda don't just climb, they strangle. The vines twine around anything vertical and keep growing thicker year after year. Mature wisteria vines can be as thick as your leg, and they're strong enough to crush wooden structures and girdle trees to death. Modern structural damage reports document wisteria vines tearing down pergolas, collapsing arbors, breaking tree limbs, and ripping gutters off houses. The vines grow with such force that they can actually twist and deform the structures they're climbing. Here's the disaster pattern. Someone plants wisteria for those gorgeous blooms. For the first few years, they get lovely flowers and manageable growth. Then the vines start getting serious. They reach the roof line. They wrap around spouts. They work their way under shingles, and they start crushing whatever structure they're using for support. The worst part is that wisteria also spreads by seed, sending out hundreds of seed pods that explode and scatter seeds everywhere. Within a few years, you've got wisteria seedlings popping up across your property, each one ready to become another monster vine. Wisteria became popular because it's genuinely beautiful and grows vigorously enough to cover large structures. But that vigor is exactly the problem. It doesn't know when to stop. It just keeps growing, keeps thickening, keeps crushing. For established wisteria on structures, you need to prune aggressively multiple times per year just to prevent structural damage. Miss a season, and the vines will take advantage. Think of it as the fairy tale plant that turns into a nightmare when it starts treating your pergola like it's trying to squeeze the life out of it. Number 8, Bermuda grass, the unkillable lawn. Bermuda grass is simultaneously one of the most popular lawn grasses and one of the most hated weeds in gardening, and there's no contradiction there. Cynodon dactylon spreads by seeds, by above-ground stolons, and by underground rhizomes. It's basically engineered to be nearly impossible to eradicate once established. This grass can spread 6F in a single growing season. Those stolons and rhizomes infiltrate flower beds, vegetable gardens, and landscape plantings with ruthless efficiency. Pull it up, and any tiny fragment of rhizome or stolon left behind will regenerate a complete plant. Here's what makes Bermuda grass truly destructive. It doesn't just spread into areas where you don't want grass. It actively competes with and excludes other plants. In flower beds, it wraps around perennials and shrubs, stealing water and nutrients. In vegetable gardens, it competes directly with your crops. Modern gardeners battle Bermuda grass constantly. It laughs at landscape fabric. It grows through mulch. It invades raised beds. Chemical control is difficult because most herbicides that kill Bermuda grass also kill everything else, and Bermuda grass recovers faster. The grass spread everywhere because it makes an excellent lawn in warm climates. It's tough, drought-tolerant, and handles foot traffic well. But the exact traits that make it good lawn grass, aggressive spreading, vigorous growth, resilience, make it an absolute nightmare everywhere else. For gardeners trying to maintain beds and borders in Bermuda grass country, it's a constant battle of digging out runners, pulling up invaders, and trying to create barriers that actually work. The grass will find any weakness and exploit it. Bermuda grass got popular as a lawn species, but it didn't stay in lawns. Think of it as the grass that decided it should be the only plant in your entire yard and has the tools to make it happen.
Number 9, bishop's weed, the variegated devil. Bishop's weed looks innocent enough. Those pretty variegated leaves, that neat ground cover habit, it seems perfect for shady areas where nothing else grows. Egopodium podagraria got its common name goutweed from historical medicinal use, but modern gardeners have other names for it, most of them unprintable. This plant spreads by underground rhizomes that fragment incredibly easily. Every tiny piece of root left in soil will grow a new plant. It forms dense colonies that exclude everything else, and it's nearly impossible to remove once established. Here's the traditional disaster. Someone plants bishop's weed as ground cover in a shady area, maybe under trees or along a fence. First season looks great. Second season, it's spread nicely. Third season, it's jumped the border and started invading adjacent beds. By year 5, it's everywhere and removal becomes a multi-year project. The variegated leaves are actually the most insidious part. They're attractive enough that people keep thinking maybe I can control it, right up until they can't. Green leaf forms are even more vigorous. Professional gardeners consider bishop's weed one of the worst mistakes a homeowner can make. Once it's in your soil, you're looking at years of digging, sifting, and removing every fragment of root. Miss a piece, and within a season, you're back where you started. The plant spread through gardens because it genuinely does fill shady areas where other ground covers struggle. But that vigor comes at a price. It won't stay where you put it, and it won't share space with anything else. But for anyone battling established bishop's weed, the only real solution is complete soil removal and replacement or years of persistent digging and herbicide treatment. Think of it as the pretty ground cover that turns into a decades-long guerrilla war in your garden. Number 10, Jerusalem artichoke, the eternal tuber. Jerusalem artichoke seems harmless. It's actually a type of sunflower that produces edible tubers. Sounds great, right? Plant it, harvest some tubers, enjoy them roasted. Except Helianthus tuberosus has a trick. Those tubers break apart incredibly easily, and every single fragment will grow a new plant. Harvest your Jerusalem artichokes. Miss a few tubers or break a few during digging, and next year you've got dozens of plants. Try to remove them. Break more tubers and the problem multiplies. Within a few years, you've got Jerusalem artichoke everywhere, and there's no practical way to get rid of it. Here's what makes this plant so frustrating. The tubers can grow 6 feet deep. They break apart if you look at them wrong. Each plant produces dozens of tubers, and they're persistent. Oh, they'll keep coming back year after year, no matter how many times you dig them up. Modern permaculture enthusiasts sometimes plant Jerusalem artichoke deliberately for food production, but experienced gardeners warn only plant them where you're okay with them spreading forever or in extremely contained areas like raised beds with solid bottom. The plants themselves grow 8 to 10 feet tall, creating dense stands that shade out everything else. They spread by tubers and can also spread by seed, making them nearly impossible to contain once established in open ground. Jerusalem artichokes spread through gardens because the tubers are actually nutritious and useful. But that one season of harvesting turns into a lifetime commitment to a plant you can never fully remove. For anyone who planted Jerusalem artichoke in their regular garden beds, you've created a permanent problem. Think of it as the plant that seemed like a fun permaculture experiment until you realize you've given it lifetime tenure in your garden, whether you want it or not. Now, if you're starting to realize just how many landmines exist in the gardening world, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach other people who are about to make expensive, decades-long mistakes. And it helps us keep making content that'll save you from landscaping disaster. And if you haven't subscribed to Everstead Roots yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're building a community of gardeners who learn from others' mistakes instead of making them ourselves. Let's keep going because we're just getting to the really catastrophic ones. Number 11, Creeping Charlie, the lawn destroyer. Creeping Charlie looks harmless enough. This low-growing ground cover with round leaves and tiny purple flowers spreads flat across the ground, rooting at every node. Glaucoma hederatia seems like it would be fine sharing space with your lawn. It's not fine. This plant spreads by stolons that root every few inches, creating an interconnected mat that crowds out grass. It thrives in shade and moist conditions where turf grass struggles, which means it specifically invades the weak spots in your lawn and takes advantage. Here's the homeowner nightmare. You notice some creeping Charlie in a shady corner of your lawn. Within 2 seasons, it's spread across 30 feet. Within 3 seasons, it's replaced significant portions of your turf. And here's the worst part. It's nearly impossible to kill selectively. Most broadleaf herbicides that homeowners use barely touch creeping Charlie. The plant has a waxy leaf coating that sheds herbicides, and its mat-forming growth means that even if you kill the top growth, the roots and stolons survive and regrow. Professional lawn services specifically charge extra for creeping Charlie control because it requires specialized herbicides, multiple applications, and there's no guarantee of success. The plant is that resilient. The ground cover spread through lawns, partly through mowing, which chops up pieces that get scattered and root where they land, and partly because it actually looks okay to some people until it takes over completely. For anyone trying to maintain a pure turf lawn in areas where creeping Charlie is established, it's a constant battle. Think of it as the ground cover that specifically targets the weakest parts of your lawn and conquers them systematically, one shady spot at a time. Number 12. Horsetail, the prehistoric survivor. Horsetail isn't just hard to kill, it's essentially unkillable by normal gardening methods. Equisetum species have been around since the dinosaurs, and they've survived this long by being nearly indestructible. The plants spread by rhizomes that can penetrate 6 feet deep into soil and shatter into fragments when you try to dig them up. Here's why horsetail is catastrophic. Those deep rhizomes are protected by a waxy coating that makes them nearly impervious to herbicides. The plants themselves contain silica that makes them toxic to grazing animals and resistant to disease and pests, and they reproduce by spores, not seeds, making them even harder to control. Modern gardeners encountering horsetail describe it as the plant that broke their spirit. You can dig for hours, removing what seems like every piece of rhizome, and within weeks it's back, growing from fragments left behind or rhizomes that were too deep to reach. The plant thrives in wet, disturbed soil, which means construction sites and poorly drained areas get colonized quickly. Once established, horsetail is essentially permanent unless you're willing to replace all soil to a depth of at least 3 feet. Chemical control is mostly ineffective. The waxy coating sheds herbicides. The deep rhizomes survive even if you kill the top growth. Multiple applications over multiple years might suppress it, but eradication is nearly impossible. Horsetails spread through gardens via contaminated soil and plant material. Those rhizomes fragment easily during digging and transport, meaning one infected load of topsoil can introduce horsetail to a pristine garden. But for anyone fighting established horsetail, you're battling a plant that survived 300 million years of planetary catastrophe. Think of it as the prehistoric survivor that made it through extinction events and isn't about to let your gardening efforts bother it one bit. Number 13, Tree of Heaven, the chemical warfare tree. Tree of Heaven earned its heavenly name from how fast it grows toward the sky. But Ailanthus altissima is actually engaged in chemical warfare against every other plant around it. This tree produces allelopathic compounds that inhibit the growth of other plants, giving it a competitive advantage that's genuinely unfair. The tree spreads by prolific seeding and aggressive root suckering. A single mature tree can produce hundreds of thousands of seeds, and the root system sends up suckers dozens of feet from the parent tree. Cut the tree down, and the root system responds by sending up dozens of new shoots. Here's what makes Tree of Heaven genuinely destructive. Those allelopathic chemicals poison the soil for other plants. The aggressive root system damages foundations, sewer lines, and pavement. The wood is weak and prone to breakage, making mature trees hazardous. Modern urban foresters consider Tree of Heaven one of the worst invasive trees in North America. It colonizes disturbed areas, vacant lots, and infrastructure cracks, then suppresses native vegetation and creates monoculture stands. The trees spread worldwide because it grows incredibly fast in poor conditions and seems almost indestructible. It survives pollution, drought, poor soil, and neglect. But those survival traits come at the cost of damaging everything around it. Removal requires killing the root system, which means either repeated herbicide treatment of cut stumps or years of persistent removal of suckers until the roots exhaust their energy reserves. For anyone with Tree of Heaven on their property, you're dealing with a tree that doesn't just compete with other plants. It actively poisons them. Think of it as the tree that plays dirty and wins by making sure nothing else can survive nearby. Number 14. Russian olive, the soil chemistry manipulator. Russian olive looks elegant with its silvery leaves and fragrant flowers. Elaeagnus angustifolia seemed like an excellent ornamental tree, especially for difficult sites with poor soil. Then people discovered what it does to soil chemistry and how aggressively it spreads. This tree is a nitrogen fixer, which sounds beneficial until you realize it's fixing nitrogen to change soil conditions in its own favor and against native plants adapted to lower nitrogen levels. The berries are spread by birds, establishing new trees across the landscape. Here's the disaster pattern. Russian olive establishes in riparian areas and disturbed sites. It grows rapidly, forms dense thickets, and crowds out native willows, cottonwoods, and other riparian vegetation. The altered nitrogen levels favor weedy species over natives. Modern ecological restoration projects spend thousands removing Russian olive from affected watersheds because its presence fundamentally changes ecosystem function. The dense thickets block wildlife movement and water access. The trees spread because it's tough, attractive, and produces fragrant flowers and berries that wildlife eat. But those same berries ensure that Russian olive doesn't stay where you plant it. Birds carry seeds for miles, establishing new populations constantly. Removal requires cutting and immediately treating stumps with herbicide to prevent resprouting. The seed bank in soil means that new seedlings will appear for years after removal. For anyone dealing with Russian olive on their property or nearby, you're fighting a plant that's literally changing the soil chemistry to favor itself. Think of it as the tree that doesn't just invade. It terraforms your land into something that better suits its needs. Number 15. Purple loosestrife, the wetland destroyer. Purple loosestrife produces spectacular spikes of purple-pink flowers that look amazing in gardens and at garden centers. Lythrum salicaria seemed like a perfect ornamental for wet areas. Then it escaped into natural wetlands and revealed its true nature. A single plant produces millions of seeds per year. Those seeds spread by water, wildlife, and contaminated equipment. The plants form dense monocultures that exclude native wetland vegetation, destroying habitat for wildlife that depends on diverse native plants. Here's the ecological nightmare. Purple loosestrife invades marshes, pond edges, and wet meadows. It outcompetes native sedges, rushes, and wildflowers that provide food and habitat for waterfowl, amphibians, and insects. The dense stands offer little value to native wildlife. Modern wetland restoration projects spend significant resources removing purple loosestrife from affected areas. The plant is banned in many states, but it continues spreading from old plantings and garden escapees. The plant spread because it's genuinely beautiful and vigorous in wet conditions where many ornamentals struggle. But that vigor destroys the ecological value of wetlands it invades. Control requires persistent removal or chemical treatment. And even then, the massive seed bank means new plants will emerge for years. Some biological control using European beetles shows promise, but isn't universally effective. For anyone with purple loosestrife near natural wetlands or ponds, you're harboring a plant that's actively degrading ecosystem health. Now think of it as the beautiful flower that's committing ecological homicide one wetland at a time. Number 16, butterfly bush, the aggressive cedar. Butterfly bush seems like it should be a gardening hero, but Buddleia attracts butterflies with its fragrant flower spikes, and it grows easily with minimal care. Then you discover how aggressively it self-seeds and spreads into natural areas. Each plant produces thousands of tiny seeds that spread by wind and water. Those seeds germinate readily in disturbed soil along waterways and in forest edges. Within years, butterfly bush colonizes riparian areas and crowds out native shrubs. Here's the controversy. Butterfly bush does attract butterflies to nectar, but it provides little value as larval host plant. Native alternatives support complete butterfly life cycles, while butterfly bush just offers a nectar source. Meanwhile, it's spreading aggressively and displacing truly beneficial natives. Modern conservation efforts in the Pacific Northwest and other regions target butterfly bush for removal from natural areas. It's considered invasive in multiple states and regions. The shrub spread through gardens because butterflies really do love it, and the flowers are attractive. But the ecological cost of its spread outweighs the benefit of attracting adult butterflies. Newer cultivars claim to be sterile or less invasive, still produce seeds in many conditions. The safest approach is removing spent flowers before they seed, but most gardeners don't do this consistently. For anyone committed to supporting butterflies, native alternatives exist that provide both nectar and larval food without the invasive spread. Think of it as the wildlife-friendly plant that turned out to be not so friendly to wildlife habitat after all. Number 17. Chameleon plant, the unstoppable underground runner. Chameleon plant has some of the most striking foliage in the ground cover world. Those leaves splashed with red, cream, and green look amazing in containers and photos. Houtunia cordata seemed like a perfect solution for difficult areas. Then you plant it in the ground and discover the horror. This plant spreads by underground rhizomes that travel with frightening speed. It fragments easily, meaning every attempt to remove it breaks it into dozens of pieces that each grow new plants, and it has a distinctive fishy odor that many people find genuinely unpleasant. Here's the nightmare trajectory. Someone plants chameleon plant in a bed for its colorful foliage. Within one season, it's spread 3 feet in all directions. By year 2, it's invading adjacent beds and lawn. By year 3, it's escaped containment entirely and shows up everywhere. The rhizomes travel underground, popping up through lawn, in cracks in pavement, and in neighboring properties. They penetrate deep enough that surface cultivation doesn't reach them, and they're so brittle that any attempt to dig them out leaves behind fragments that regenerate. Professional landscapers list chameleon plant among their most hated ground covers. Removal requires either complete soil replacement or years of persistent herbicide treatment. Even then, success isn't guaranteed. The plant spread through gardens because it is genuinely attractive in containers where it's contained. But in-ground planting is a disaster that most gardeners regret forever. For anyone who planted chameleon plant in the ground, you've created a multi-year eradication project. I think of it as the ground cover that combines the worst traits of mint, bishop's weed, and horsetail into one unstoppable foul-smelling package. Number 18. Morning Glory, the smothering vine. Wild morning glories produce cheerful, funnel-shaped flowers in pink, purple, and white. Convolvulus and Ipomoea species climb and spread with enthusiasm that seems charming until you realize they're smothering everything in their path and receding with abandon. These vines grow rapidly, wrapping around anything vertical and pulling it down under their weight. They produce copious seeds that remain viable in soil for decades. The bindweed types have deep roots that regrow even after repeated removal attempts. Here's the garden disaster. Morning glories strangle garden plants, smother shrubs, and create tangled masses that collapse under their own weight. They climb up and over everything, blocking sunlight and stressing support plants. The seeds spread everywhere by birds, by water, and by contaminated soil. Each plant produces hundreds of seeds, and those seeds germinate readily whenever soil is disturbed. This creates a perpetual cycle of new plants appearing year after year. Modern gardeners battle morning glory constantly. The vines grow so fast during peak season that they can cover a shrub in a week. Pull them up, and the seeds you disturb ensure next year's crop. Chemical control is difficult because the heart-shaped leaves shed herbicides and the deep roots of bindweed types survive most treatments. Persistent removal of top growth eventually exhausts the plants, but it takes years. Morning glory spread through gardens because the flowers are attractive and the plants grow readily. But that easy growth never stops where you want it. For anyone fighting established morning glory, Hey, you're in for years of pulling vines before they seed. Think of it as the cheerful flower that wraps everything in suffocating hugs while ensuring its children will do the same for decades to come. Number 19, Yellow Archangel, the forest floor. Yellow Archangel might be the least known plant on this list, but it's one of the most destructive in areas where it's established. Lamiastrum galeopdilon spreads by stolons and forms such dense ground cover that absolutely nothing else can grow underneath. The plant was introduced as an ornamental ground cover for shade, and it excels at covering ground. It escapes gardens and invades forest understories, forming monoculture carpets that exclude native wildflowers and forest regeneration. Here's the ecological disaster. Yellow Archangel invades natural forest areas and eliminates spring wildflowers, trilliums, bloodroot, wild ginger, and dozens of other native species that can't compete with its dense growth. This impacts everything from pollinators to forest regeneration. A modern forest management in affected regions specifically targets Yellow Archangel for removal, but it's a difficult battle. The stolons root at every node, creating interconnected mats. Removal disturbs soil and often leaves fragments that regenerate. The ground cover spread because it grows reliably in deep shade where most ground covers fail, and the variegated forms are attractive. But that shade tolerance makes it devastating in forest understories. Control requires persistent removal or herbicide treatment, and restoration requires replanting native species to fill the space before Yellow Archangel returns. For anyone with Yellow Archangel near natural areas, you're contributing to forest degradation. Think of it as the ground cover that doesn't just take over your garden, it invades wild forests and eliminates irreplaceable native plant communities. Number 20, Black Locust, the root-suckering nightmare. And here we are at number 20, and this is the plant I saved for last because it represents everything we've talked about today. Black Locust combines aggressive root-suckering, allelopathy, and rapid growth into one package of destruction that can transform open land into impenetrable thicket. Robinia pseudoacacia sends root suckers out in all directions, sometimes dozens of feet from the parent tree. Each sucker becomes a new tree that sends out its own sucker. Within years, a single tree becomes a spreading colony of thorny trees that exclude everything else. Here's the fascinating and terrifying reality. Black locust is native to a small region of Appalachia, but has spread across North America and globally. The wood is valuable, dense, rot-resistant, and useful. But the tree's spreading habit makes it catastrophic in landscapes. The trees also fix nitrogen, altering soil chemistry to favor themselves, and weedy species over native plants adapted to lower nitrogen conditions. They produce allelopathic compounds that further suppress competition, and they're armed with sharp thorns that make clearing them genuinely dangerous. Modern land managers fighting black locust describe it as one of the most difficult invasive trees to control. Cut them down and you get 100 suckers. Treat with herbicide and the root system survives and sends up new shoots. Persistent management over years is required. Traditional uses included erosion control and living fences, which is how it spread so widely. Those fence posts are still spreading, still suckering, still taking over decades later. Here's what makes this plant the perfect ending to our list. Black locust shows how a plant can have genuine value. The wood really is excellent while being an absolute nightmare to live with. The very traits that make it useful, fast growth, dense wood, ability to thrive in poor soil, make it nearly impossible to control once established. Black locust escaped cultivation because people planted it deliberately for practical reasons and didn't realize the long-term consequences. For anyone dealing with black locust on their property, you're facing years of constant battle against root suckers, or you're accepting that the tree will gradually convert your land to black locust forest. Think of it as the reminder that sometimes the plant that seems most useful is actually the one that will take the most from you. It doesn't ask permission. Now, it doesn't stay contained. It just spreads year after year, sucker after sucker, until you either surrender or commit to a lifetime of management. If you made it this far and you're feeling grateful you learned about these destructive plants before planting them, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and helps other people avoid these catastrophic gardening mistakes. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you dealt with any of these plants? Which one sounds like your worst nightmare? I read every comment, and I love hearing your horror stories. And if you haven't subscribed to Everstead Roots yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. We're here to help you garden smarter, avoid expensive mistakes. Oh, and actually enjoy your yard instead of fighting it for decades. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important gardening